I'm reporting on the research capacity development session stream. We were really trying to focus on how to bridge the gap between what is the current situation regarding research and capacity development, and where is it we want to go, what is it we want to reach. First of all, let me thank very much to all those that have participated, not only in terms of presentations, but also in having made the effort to find that small room under the stairs, which proved to be very cozy indeed. Thank you, Yuji, because many times there was people standing, which gives always a great feeling, because there was great demand and interest for the sessions. So that was good. It created also a sense of mixed interest and interaction, and in a way enabled a lot of discussion. We had 3 sessions with 3 papers that were discussed, and then we had 2 sessions really dedicated to brainstorming to try to actually look for how to bridge this gap. In terms of outcomes, we've organized this in 3 sections. One is the research agenda. In fact, this has not been easy to try to, as well as for all the others, I'm sure, but there's been various ideas that were going all over the place, and we've tried to converge this into these points. One, in terms of research agenda, the research of SCA through inductive frameworks that are based on pillars of theory. In other words, bodies of knowledge, of scientific theory that are already out there, that can provide a very robust support, scientific support to strategic environmental assessment, such as, for example, learning theory or political sciences or system thinking, and that can be very useful to help the understanding of SEA. The second point on the research agenda, what we call the transdisciplinary research for SEA. So something that has a visionary thinking of SEA, how to deal with the values that have to be considered, not only environmental values, but social values, political values, and in a way encourage the thinking of SEA a bit outside the box. It's interesting to see how these points could link well with various other points that came through in other streams. So on the capacity development agenda, 3 main points that can highlight the various issues discussed. One, important, critical, creating enabling conditions for learning. Learning across different countries, learning across different institutions, different practices, something that goes back into the institutional memory as well. This institutional memory proved to be fundamental in terms of securing the continuity throughout time of improving towards better performance in SEA. Capacity development also not only for developing countries but also for developed countries. So this is something that also came strongly. There has been, maybe because of all the activity of the donor and organizations and in development cooperation, there's been too much a focus on developing countries. However, in all countries, the need for innovation calls for increased capacity. And a third point on the capacity development agenda, what we call here the incentive-led SEA through or for empowerment, getting the actors, the key actors in SEA in the respective institutions, in the respective countries, to feel empowered about SEA, and looking very much to influence political mindsets, for example, and influence long-term political commitments. And then a third block, which we call the research capacity nexus. So how is that research and capacity development can and should link up and benefit from each other? Someone during the session said that research was the theory and capacity development was the practice. Well, it is not so much as that, but in a way that illustrates how the two can link together. And 2 main points on this research capacity nexus. One, the meaning of excellence, of SEA outcomes. What does it mean when we say that we have a success SEA? What are the ingredients, what are the elements, what are the outcomes that can express that? And here we go back to the learning issue, learning with practice to improve performance, and how research can help in rationalizing, in making an analysis of evidences that comes from practice. And second point, how is capacity development catching up with SEO research? To what point SEO research is able to communicate to the practitioners, to the professionals that are out there in the field, and to what point the professionals are able to feedback into the research and academia groups their issues, their problems, their priorities, and to what point they actually are able to communicate. So those were the main conclusions coming out from the research and capacity development. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Let me briefly introduce the conclusions we achieved from Team 9, which was focused on SCA for EU cohesion policy. We co-chaired the session with Ursula Jesler from Poland. Thanks a lot. It was very pleasant cooperation. And since we had a lot of fruitful discussions within our sessions, thanks to all who contributed, we had to work hard at the end to meet a very tough requirement given by Gary, which means 1 slide, 5 bullets. But here are the results. Actually, in order to avoid repeating some inconvenient truths, we try to formulate as specific conclusions as possible, focused on operational programs. Well, one of the golden rules for efficient SEA practice says start SEA as early as possible, but what does it mean for next period of EU cohesion policy? We can conclude that early for operational programs, early means now, or better yesterday, or even last week, since the fact is that the discussions on future priorities and objectives to be funded in next programming period have been already launched in member states, and community strategic guidelines should be presented by the end of 2011. So it seems to be right time now when SCA can really influence some strategic decisions to be made, as it is supposed to do. And doing or starting at least some preparatory works now would also allow to SCA to provide some inputs into, baseline inputs into preparation of operational programs. It also means that SCA shouldn't be applied probably only for operational programs, but should also address the so-called partnership contracts. For those who are not quite familiar with the architecture of programming for cohesion policy, I should say that the partnership contracts will replace current national development plans, or national strategic reference frameworks, and will represent the kind of national policies stipulating the key priorities and objectives to be funded from EU funds from in next programming period. And it's not clear yet whether these partnership contracts will meet all screening criteria given by SCA directive. However, it can be recommended to carry out SCA for these documents as a kind of a good practice. Then it was repeated a couple of times that the proper TORs are really essential for efficient SCA, not only for operational programs in general. And the TORs should optimally stipulate requirements both from procedural point of view, that means specifying what should be the linkages between SCA and programming process, what consultations should be carried out, etc., as well as it should address content point of view. Optimally, managing authorities or environmental authorities should specify what inputs they would appreciate the most, what should be the most important conclusions given by or provided by SCA. Preparing the TOR, it's of course responsibility of managing authorities. However, it seems to be beneficial even now when formulating the TOR, invite other sectoral ministries, including environmental ministries or central authorities responsible for public health, in order to provide a room to express their requirements or their expectations from SCA. So very practically, it can be recommended to establish a kind of interministerial group works in member states or kind of steering committees in order to provide a platform when TORs for SCA could be formulated. And possibly these bodies could be transformed into a permanent groups which would monitor the entire SCA process and even monitor how conclusions provided by SCA are used during the implementation of operational programs. We also discussed that compared to the current programming period and the existing SCAs, and the future SCA should be more focused on the process. That means playing a greater role in preparation of the operation programs, in consultation, providing and facilitating dialogue maybe among the operational programs within the country, in order to influence the content and the way how the operational programs are going to be implemented. And not only to rigidly concentrate on a final product, which is SCA report, which is important, however, it should be only a byproduct of the process. It was also mentioned that since we live in an era of economic problems or economic crisis, and obviously the conditions we have now are different from conditions which were in place when current programs were prepared and SCA were carried out, and the similar thing might happen also in a future program period. So it was recommended that SCA shouldn't be limited only to assessment during preparation of the program, but also there should be a space to reconsider the SCA conclusions as a part maybe of a midterm review. This means in order to check whether still all inputs or conclusions are valid. Then we discussed the environmental monitoring. It was mentioned that, of course, in general, it was mentioned that by representatives of implementing agencies that environmental monitoring systems were one of the main useful outputs given by SCA for current operational programs. And generally, indicators has to be measurable, meaningful, and realistic, and followed optimally by some environmental criteria for project selection and evaluation. It was mentioned that probably the maximum number of indicators for one operation program shouldn't be higher than 6 or 7 indicators per program. I'm not sure if it's realistic. And then the last point is dedicated to the role of the European Commission. I'm not sure if we still have some representatives of the Commission here, but anyway. Well, we discussed it already with data from the Commissions, and it seems that, Commission expects that the quality of SCA for future programs should be enhanced, and we believe that the above mentioned points, when promoted by the Commission towards the Member States, could help to do so. Well, in particular, Commission could clearly indicate that the SCA should start now, as early as possible, even if programming processes haven't been formally launched. Commission should also stress out the importance of the TOR for efficient SCA practice and possibly facilitate the exchange of a good practice for TOR among the Member States. And also Commission may suggest that the SCA for partnership contracts could be carried out even if not meeting the criteria given by SCA directive, but it's kind of a good practice. So thanks a lot for your attention, and thanks to all who contributed to the session. Thank you.
Relax, I only have 14 slides. I'm not joking. Let me start with the most important thing that I would like to say. We had an excellent stream of sessions. Actually, some of the people in the audience refer to it as the best we ever had at IA meetings, and this would not have happened without very hard work or very listening. Thank you. I will not, let's go to the stream. I will not summarize. What I'll do is, I'll just pretend that we're all on a birthday party, and you ask me, Rob, what came out of that stream, right? And I'll share the following with you. First, a couple of very clear answers to questions. This was what the topic was all about, for the most part of the stream. What does it mean if we say we have to adapt to context? Because that's what we say, we always say. But what does it really mean? Should SCA look different in different countries? Yes. Is it a good idea to start in all countries from a common basis? No. Should we in the long run work towards the same kind of SCA system in all countries? No. Why not? SCA is not McDonald's. If there is one slide you take away from my stream, it's this one. You can remember this one. I will rehearse all of you next IAA. How flexible should we be? Very. But we have to be clear at the same time about what SCA is and what it's not. SCA is not anything goes. This is the second slide. If you could do 2 slides, remember, this could be the second one. It's not anything goes. And there is a very clear request from developing countries to be very clear about what SCA is, or it will not happen. So, this is the challenge. How to combine clarity with flexibility. 2 recommendations from the stream. 2 issues, essential issues in adaptation to context. Do not start development cooperation from a blueprint of what SCA should be. Start from the objectives of what it should deliver, what it should do, and do not be flexible about these objectives. No flexibility. These are the objectives, this is what should be delivered. Then be flexible in the adaptive context in how we will deliver. Secondly, we all of us, if we get engaged in development cooperation from a donor side, apply the right strategy for engagement. The most important thing, don't be a teacher. Don't tell people what to do how. Help them to understand the SCA objectives, then lean back, listen, learn, and then support. This was the first part. Let me go now to the second part of the stream, which was about donor coordination in SCA. We all work in a multitude of countries. Are we coordinating our work effectively? Well, it's very difficult to do that. Why? Because it is time and money consuming to coordinate. It is very difficult to know who does what, even within the same organization. It may be impossible to know what's happening as to SCA. And there is no incentive for practitioners to report what they are doing after they've done it. So that yes, they will use a coordination mechanism for their own purposes up front, but once they're ready, let's go to the next one. They don't report back. There's no incentive, so it's very difficult. But it's urgently needed. So, what we then did do is 2 interesting initiatives were discussed. One of them was donor coordination within a country, where the country took the lead. So the donors helped the country to be in the lead. This was in Vietnam. And actually every 3 months, a new donor matrix, what all the donors were doing as to SCA in Vietnam, was discussed under the lead of the country. Very effective. And secondly, there is now an ongoing attempt by OSVDAC SCA task team with NCA UNP or members of that task team to see if we can create an interactive map on the web, where you can just click a country and immediately see who is doing what where with the contact details. That's it. Thank you.
I will make a summary. And indeed, I follow the rules that were prepared by the organizer. So the reporting will consider the challenges, then it will go to discuss the opportunities and suggest some ways forward. But to begin with, let me thank Tia Olobo, who helped with this stream and chaired very many sessions, as well as all the presenters. That this session comprised 5 paper sessions and 1 workshop. And although the issue is relatively new, there was a very lively and useful discussion. And don't worry, there are not going to be more heresies. The first thing that was discussed in terms of the challenges, distilling what was the discussion, is the fact that the people present perceive that a policy SCA lacks teeth. So it is done, but what happened at the end of the process? That was an issue that called attention. Oh, sorry, I forgot that. To some extent, that may be related to the fact that policy SEA is mainly voluntary. So there was a discussion about making it mandatory or not, and to what extent. You can imagine it was quite lively on that regard. I don't need to say more about that. On other issues that were identified was the fact that public participation is not done early at an early stage, and the analysis sometimes is not comprehensive enough when it's done in a process of public participation. There was a discussion about how much information and how many issues and to what extent critical decision issues really should go back to the communities, to the stakeholders. Also, it's a question rather than a solution, it's a challenge. And this is related with the level in which the people or the communities could access to relevant information. So there is a need to analyze the public participation at the policy level, to what extent this leads to a deepening discussion, and this will depend on the transparency and access to information. And there was also a recommendation in the sense that SEA at a high level, if it's presented as a high level SEA, is going to create resistance. The discussion concluded that the policy SEA should be proactive, not reactive, and this is in line with what we have heard already by other presenters. Perhaps the most interesting part that we have in this stream relates to the opportunities. We identified 4 interesting opportunities for policy SEA. The first one is the adoption of the UNC Protocol on SEA, which, although does not establish a mandatory framework for policy, it does require parties to report on application. So it's going to be a way in which we can really learn from what was said by another presenter, from practice. And it may create a different type of incentive than just regulating or making things mandatory, to see what the neighbor is doing and maybe trying to do it better. And the fact that this protocol is open to all UN member states give the possibility of a global type of comparison, a global type of competition, and also in doing good SEA. Another opportunity that was discussed is about the potential for two-way learning from existing impact assessment approaches on policy. Particularly that was relevant from the analysis in Europe. It was said that impact assessment has flexible guidance for assessing policies, that there is a lot of experience to learn from that in doing policy SEA. But also it was acknowledged that the impact assessment of policies doesn't provide for public participation, so they can learn from SEA how to do better on this side. It was also discussed the importance of policy SEA in this unique moment in which the world, particularly Europe, and Europe is dragging the whole world into that direction of recession, of economic and financial tensions may have. This is calling for, and it's probably lead to a process, to a wide array of reforms. Therefore, there is the impression in the discussions and in the discussion we had that policy SEA should be a way of securing a green type of growth. We don't know yet what is that, but we could realize that it has a lot to do with incorporating environmental considerations into these reforms that will lead to a new process of growth. And I would like to highlight that also it was discussed, not for policy SEA only, but particularly for SEA in general, the fact that there could be an interesting level of application of this tool for the private sector. We had a presentation on the banking sector that can be summarized by saying that the banks are risk management institutions by definition, and then high-level risks are prized for them as important for their analysis, something that SEA maybe could provide. The analysis started by saying that maybe the SEAs that the public sector does would satisfy that. That's what was coming from research. But then in the discussion, we realized that maybe the banks themselves will start to commission SEAs to address this macro or systemic risk, and that could open an entire new avenue for all of us, and I think very healthy one. In relation to ways forward for policy SEA, of course, this agenda, the opportunities that are there, it would be critical to have a way of sizing these opportunities and incorporating into the agenda. There is a potential to treat SEA as a very specialized and useful tool to enhance transparency and the promotion of a culture of public involvement in public strategic decision making. That's all. That was also interesting because it's finding like a niche for policy SEA themselves, where it can deliver added value. That's a question. Then in some moment our discussion went to say something as to what extent policy SEA could be a way, could be a process that contributes to deepening democracy, but we didn't went to that much far on that. Was very controversial, but it's a very interesting question. Another thing is that whenever a policy SEA is done, it should promote sustainable development by focusing on doing good, not on preventing and mitigating environmental degradation. At that higher level, the people identify that the greatest added value is not in identifying potential problems, but identifying potential opportunities for development to be green, for development to be more sustainable. But this requires that SEA should be more forward-looking and more strategic, something that has been already said by other colleagues today. And finally, it was identified that there is, looking forward, a need for a strengthening monitoring of results and impact when policy SEA is done. This is it. Thank you.